I thought I'd left the hardest parts of my life behind me after leaving the army, but 2 years later, when my sister Claire convinced me to visit a small animal shelter, I never expected what would happen next. As I walked through the aisles, I saw him, Max, my old partner from the battlefield, a war dog who saved my life time and time again. But when I called his name, he didn't respond. He didn't recognize me. His once sharp and loyal eyes were now distant, empty, like he'd forgotten everything we'd been through. What happened to him after we were separated? And could I ever bring back the dog who meant the world to me? This is the story of how I fought to reconnect with Max, the one who never gave up on me, even when the world tried to break him. Before we dive into this emotional journey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss a single chapter of Ethan and Max's incredible story of loyalty, trauma, and redemption. Trust me, this is a journey you'll want to see through to the end. The Arizona sun was setting, casting long shadows across the gravel road as I approached the shelter. My boots scraped against the ground, a sound that pulled at memories I'd tried to leave behind. For 2 years I'd been chasing distractions, new jobs, therapy, anything to dull the pain. Nothing worked. Claire's voice echoed in my mind. You need something to help you heal, Ethan. Maybe a dog will remind you that not everything is hopeless. I had laughed her off at first, but now I was here. The idea felt ridiculous, but I didn't have much to lose. The shelter was small, its chain-link fences rusted and sagging. Inside, the sound of barking filled the air, mixing with the sterile smell of disinfectant. The place was far from inviting, but I wasn't expecting much. As I walked through the rows of kennels, I scanned each dog with a critical eye. Some wagged their tails enthusiastically, pressing against the bars, while others sat quietly, watching me with cautious eyes. Nothing felt right. Every bark or wag felt like background noise. None of these dogs could replace what I'd lost. I was about to turn back when a staff member approached. She was young with short blonde hair tucked neatly behind her ears. Her name tag read Sarah Whitman, and she carried herself with a calm authority that made me stop. Are you Ethan Caldwell? She asked, her voice polite but curious. Yeah, I replied, glancing at her. Just looking. She nodded. We just got a German Shepherd in a few weeks ago. He's in the back. Maybe you'd like to see him. Something about her tone made me pause. German Shepherd. My heart skipped a beat. Without another word, I followed her down a quieter aisle. At the end, in the farthest corner, was a large dog lying on the ground. His black and tan fur was matted, and his posture was stiff, almost lifeless. I froze. Even before I saw his face, I knew. Max, I whispered, my voice cracking. The dog's head lifted slowly, his brown eyes meeting mine. But there was no spark of recognition. His eyes, once sharp and filled with determination, were hollow and empty. Sarah glanced at me, her expression hesitant. Do you know him? I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. We were partners in the army. Her gaze softened. He's been through a lot. He was transferred here from another state after being surrendered. Anxiety, trust issues. I stepped closer, kneeling down in front of the cage. Max, it's me, I murmured, extending a hand toward him. He didn't move. No wagging tail, no spark of recognition. He just stared at me as if I were a stranger. My chest tightened. How could he not remember me? Sarah shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing the tension. Would you like to spend some time with him? We can take him to the play yard. I nodded, my voice barely audible. Yeah, let's try. The play yard was a fenced-off area with sparse patches of grass and a couple of chew toys scattered around. Max walked out of the cage hesitantly, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were testing the ground with each step. I followed Sarah into the yard, keeping a safe distance to avoid overwhelming him. Max didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He sniffed the air cautiously, circling the yard with his tail low. I knelt down, holding out my hand again. Max, buddy, it's me. It's Ethan. For a moment, he paused, his ears twitching slightly. My heart leapt with hope. But then he turned away, retreating to the far corner of the yard. Sarah sighed softly. It's going to take time. He's been through a lot more than we know. Time, that's all I'd had for 2 years. Time to think, time to regret, time to miss him. I clenched my fists, a mix of frustration and determination rising in me. I'm not giving up on him, I said firmly. The ride home was quieter than I expected. Max sat in the back seat of my truck, his body pressed against the side, staring out the window. His posture was stiff, like he was ready to leap out at the first sign of danger. I glanced at him through the rearview mirror, my chest tightening. This wasn't the Max I remembered. 2 years ago, he was a force of nature, always alert, always ready. On missions, he'd be the first to pick up on danger, barking a warning or pulling me back before it was too late. But now, he looked like a shadow of the dog I used to know. When we pulled into my driveway, I parked and stepped out, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Come on, buddy, I said, opening the truck door. Max hesitated. His ears twitched, but he didn't move. I crouched down, trying to meet his gaze. It's okay, Max. You're safe now. After a long pause, he jumped down, his movements cautious. He sniffed the air, scanning the yard with a wary look. My house was small, surrounded by a decent-sized yard with a couple of trees swaying in the light breeze. Inside, I had prepared a corner of the living room for him. A new dog bed, bowls of food and water, and a couple of chew toys. I pointed to the corner. This is your spot, buddy. Max sniffed the air but didn't approach. Instead, he stayed near the door, his body tense. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. That night I left my bedroom door open, hoping he'd feel comfortable enough to come closer. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of our time together. I remembered the first day I met him during training. He was energetic, smart, and fearless. A perfect partner. Over time, we built a bond that went beyond handler and dog. He was my lifeline in the field, the one constant in a world of chaos. But now it felt like that bond was gone. Around midnight, I heard the soft sound of paws on the wooden floor. I held my breath, listening as Max moved closer. He didn't come all the way to the bed, but laid down near the doorway, his breathing steady. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next morning, I woke up to find him sitting by the window, staring outside. The sight made my chest ache. He looked lost, as if he didn't know where he belonged. Good morning, Max, I said, keeping my voice light. He glanced at me briefly before turning back to the window. Determined to make progress, I spent the day trying to interact with him. I grabbed a tennis ball and rolled it across the floor, hoping to spark some interest. He watched it for a moment, but didn't move. I tried offering him treats, placing them near his bowl. He only approached after I stepped back. Each attempt at closeness felt like hitting a wall. But I refused to give up. Later that afternoon, I rummaged through an old box of gear from my time in the Army. Among the items was a worn military vest, the same one I used to wear during missions with Max. It still carried the faint smell of sand and sweat. Taking it outside, I called Max over. Look, buddy, remember this? He stood a few feet away, his ears perked slightly as he sniffed the air. I placed the vest on the ground and stepped back, giving him space. Max approached cautiously, lowering his head to sniff the fabric. For a moment, his body seemed to relax, and I thought I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. But just as quickly, he stepped back, his tail low. I sighed, sitting down on the porch. I'm not giving up on you, Max, I said softly. You never gave up on me, and I'm not going to quit now. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the sound of paws again. This time, Max came closer, stopping just a few feet away from me. He didn't touch me, but his presence was enough to give me hope. Small steps. That's what it would take. The rain began just as the sun dipped below the horizon. It wasn't a heavy downpour, just a steady drizzle that brought a cool breeze through the open window. Max stood by the doorway, his nose pointed toward the faint scent of wet earth. I sat on the couch, watching him carefully. For the past few days we'd been stuck in this silent rhythm, him keeping his distance, me trying not to push too hard. It was like walking a tightrope, balancing between giving him space and showing him I wasn't going anywhere. I decided to try something different. I reached for the whistle I kept in a drawer. It was the same one I'd used in the field, a signal Max had always responded to without fail. Holding it in my hand, I hesitated. Was this the right move? Would it trigger something painful for him? I blew 2 short, sharp notes. Max's ears perked up immediately, and he turned toward me. My heart raced. "Do you remember this, Max?" I asked softly, my voice steady but laced with hope. He stared at me, his body stiff, as if caught between recognition and hesitation. Slowly he took a single step forward, then stopped, his gaze fixed on the whistle. I placed it on the floor in front of me and leaned back. "It's okay, buddy. You don't have to come closer if you're not ready." For what felt like an eternity, Max stayed frozen, his eyes darting between me and the whistle. Finally he moved. His steps were slow and deliberate, but he closed the distance. He sniffed the whistle cautiously, his nostrils flaring as if searching for a memory buried deep within him. My chest tightened as I watched. This was the closest he'd come to willingly interacting with me. "Good boy," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. Max looked up at me briefly before stepping back again, his tail tucked low. But he didn't retreat completely. Instead, he lay down a few feet away, his eyes never leaving mine. It wasn't much, but it was a spark, a tiny glimmer of the dog I once knew. The next morning, I decided to build on that progress. I went out to the yard, the old rubber ball in my hand. It was worn and scratched from years of use, a relic from our time in the army. "Hey, Max," I called, my tone light. He stood near the porch, his posture cautious but less tense than before. I held up the ball and gave it a gentle toss across the yard. "What do you think, buddy? Still remember how to fetch?" Max tilted his head, watching the ball roll to a stop. For a moment, I thought he'd ignore it completely. But then, to my surprise, he took a step forward. "Go on," I encouraged, keeping my voice steady. Max approached the ball slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. He sniffed it, nudging it with his nose, before finally picking it up with his mouth. My heart swelled. "Good boy, Max," I said, my voice filled with genuine excitement. He carried the ball halfway back before dropping it and retreating a few steps, his eyes watching me closely. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than I'd hoped for. That night, as the rain continued to fall, Max did something that nearly brought me to tears. As I sat on the couch, he walked over and lay down beside me, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel his presence. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, letting the moment sink in. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. Max wasn't just the dog I was trying to save. He was the partner who had once saved me. And no matter how long it took, I was determined to bring him back. The following morning, I decided to call Sarah. Something about Max's behavior was bothering me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story than she'd told me. "Hey, Sarah," I began, trying to keep my voice casual. "I've been working with Max, and I'm starting to see some small progress, but I can't stop wondering. Do you know anything more about what happened to him before he ended up at the shelter?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I was hoping you wouldn't ask," she said finally, her tone hesitant. "There are some details in his file. I didn't share them earlier because I didn't want to overwhelm you." "Sarah, I need to know," I pressed. "Whatever it is, I can handle it." She sighed. "Okay, Max was surrendered to a smaller shelter in another state before being transferred here. His previous owner, well, let's just say they didn't know how to handle him. He was kept isolated most of the time, chained up in a backyard. There are reports of neglect and possible abuse." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of the confident, fearless dog I'd known with the broken, distrustful animal now lying in my living room. "How long was he with them?" I asked, my throat tightening. "Almost a year," Sarah replied softly. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I know this must be hard to hear." Hard didn't even begin to cover it. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at Max. He was lying by the window again, his gaze distant. The scars on his body, ones I hadn't fully noticed before, suddenly seemed to scream at me. A small tear on his ear, a faint line along his side. How had I missed those? I felt a wave of guilt crash over me. I should have been there for him. I should have fought harder to adopt him after the army retired him. Instead, I'd let him slip away, and now he was paying the price. "Max," I said softly, kneeling down beside him. His ears twitched slightly, but he didn't look at me. "I'm so sorry, buddy, I let you down." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. That afternoon, I decided to do something different. I took Max to the park, a place where he could feel the grass under his paws and the open sky above him. I hoped it would remind him of the freedom we'd once shared during our breaks in the field. He hesitated at first, his body tense as we walked through the gate. But as we moved farther into the park, I noticed his posture begin to relax. I found a quiet spot under a tree and sat down, letting Max explore at his own pace. He sniffed the ground cautiously, his movements slow and deliberate. "Do you remember this, Max?" I asked, tossing the old rubber ball a short distance. To my surprise, he perked up slightly, his ears twitching. He approached the ball, nudging it with his nose before picking it up and bringing it back to me. "You're still in there," I murmured, stroking his head gently. For the first time, Max didn't pull away. He let me touch him, his eyes meeting mine with a flicker of something familiar. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of it. That night back at home, Max did something that left me speechless. As I sat on the couch, he climbed up beside me and rested his head on my lap. I froze, afraid to move and break the moment. "You're coming back to me," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I stayed awake, running my fingers gently through his fur, silently promising him that I'd never let anything happen to him again. The sun was just beginning to rise when I opened the back door and stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew-covered grass. Max followed me, his movements more relaxed than they had been in weeks. "Ready for today, buddy?" I asked, looking down at him. His ears perked up slightly, and for the first time, his tail wagged. A small, hesitant movement, but it was there. I had decided to take him back to the field where we used to train, a place filled with memories of our time together in the Army. It was a risky move, but I felt like we were finally ready to face those memories together. As we drove, I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He wasn't pressed against the side of the truck like before. Instead, he sat upright, his head tilted slightly as he watched the passing scenery. When we arrived, the sight of the open field brought a wave of nostalgia crashing over me. The tall grass swayed gently in the breeze, and the faint sound of birds filled the air. Max jumped out of the truck, his nose immediately to the ground, as he began to explore. I stood back, letting him take it all in. "Do you remember this place, Max?" I asked softly. He lifted his head, looking around as if trying to piece together a memory. I pulled out the whistle from my pocket, the same one I had used during training. Holding it to my lips, I gave 2 short blows. Max froze. His ears shot up, and his body tensed. For a moment, I thought he might retreat, but then something changed. He turned toward me, his eyes locking onto mine. "Come on, Max," I called, my voice filled with the same energy I used to have during our missions. Without hesitation, he ran toward me, his movements fluid and confident. When he reached me, he sat down at my feet, his eyes bright and alert. My chest swelled with emotion. "Good boy, Max," I said, kneeling down to wrap my arms around him. He didn't pull away this time. Instead, he leaned into me, his tail wagging furiously. We spent the next hour going through some of the old drills, simple commands, fetch, and even a mock search exercise. Max responded to every command with precision, as if the past 2 years had melted away. But the most emotional moment came when he brought the rubber ball back to me for the 3rd time. As he dropped it at my feet, he looked up at me with eyes that were no longer empty. They were filled with trust, loyalty, and something else. Recognition. "You're back," I whispered, stroking his head. The drive home was different this time. Max lay in the back seat, his head resting on the edge of the seat. Every now and then, I'd catch him looking at me through the mirror, his tail thumping softly against the truck bed. When we got home, Max didn't hesitate to follow me inside. He walked straight to his corner in the living room, curling up on the bed I'd bought him weeks ago. Later that evening, as I sat on the couch, Max jumped up beside me and rested his head on my lap again, but this time there was no hesitation. I ran my fingers through his fur, a sense of peace settling over me. "We made it, Max," I murmured. "We're a team again." That night, as Max lay at the foot of my bed, I couldn't help but feel like a part of me had been restored. The guilt and regret I had carried for so long didn't seem as heavy anymore. Max wasn't just a dog, he was a survivor just like me, and together we had found our way back to each other. This story of Ethan and Max shows us the true power of loyalty, love, and determination in the face of life's hardest battles. If this journey touched your heart, let us know in the comments. Share your thoughts or even your own stories of special connections with animals. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. There are more powerful stories waiting to be told, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey with us.